Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. In 2026, we celebrate body positivity, normalize pleasure, affirm identities, and teach everything and anything about sex ed. But our bodies are also being debated in courtrooms and political conversations more than ever in our modern era. That's why I want to tell you about a podcast I think you'll love, one that feels especially important right now. It's called Repros Fight Back. Right now, reproductive health is facing seismic shifts and can feel confusing, overwhelming, and exhausting. And Repros Fight Back gives clear and easy to understand breakdowns with experts of what's happening to sexual and reproductive health and what it means for real people. It's a space to know whether people can access birth control, what is happening for abortion in your state, whether folks can receive gender-affirming treatment, or safely give birth. Access to this information is vital now more than ever. Check out Repros Fight Back wherever you get your podcasts, because here, comprehensive sex education includes understanding your rights. Hello, and welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. I'm DB, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert. Welcome to In Between Seasons, where we're doing best of episodes and feed drop swaps and guest bonus episodes and a whole bunch of fun stuff. Today, in this best of episode, we are diving into the steamy and scintillating world of BDSM. First, what is BDSM? Pop quiz. Maybe you can pause it and say it out loud, and then you could see if you got it right. And a lot of us have heard the letters, but might not know what they all mean. And BDSM is actually made up of 3 different acronyms, all squished together. The B is for bondage, the D is for discipline and also for dominance, the S is for submission and also sadism, and the M is for masochism. So the 3 acronyms, breaking that down, are BD, bondage and discipline, DS, dominance and submission, and SM, S&M as we used to say, sadism and masochism. As Rihanna says, S, M, wait, what is it? S, and M, that's it. Okay, we're moving on. Not everyone into BDSM is into all of these types of play. Many people are into just 1 or 2 aspects of it. BDSM is an umbrella term for lots and lots of different kinds of sexual play, usually involving some kind of exchange of power. And in this best of episode, we're going to go into 2 primary parts of BDSM, dominance and submission. First, you'll hear from Tammy Jo Eckhart from our episode on her relationship with her consensual slave. Then you'll hear from Lena Dune, aka Ask a Sub, about submission. Are you a dom, a sub, a switch who moves between both roles? Vanilla but intrigued about looking into some BDSM? Vanilla but just like learning? All are welcome here. And I hope that these clips help you learn more about yourself. Here we go. Hello and welcome. Could you go ahead and give a quick introduction of yourself for our listeners? You can feel free to use a pseudonym also.
Hi, I'm Tammy Jo Eckhart. I'm out, so that is my real name. That is what I'm published under. That's where you can find me on social media. I am an ancient historian. I have a PhD in ancient history with minors in folklore and the history of gender and sexuality. I've been married for 33 years, and I have been in a consensual master-slave relationship for 25 years. I'm a published author and an award-winning educator of kink and also history topics. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk with you, Danielle, about SM and how it actually works in real life, and how MS relationships might differ from DS ones.
Awesome. Wow. You're so cool. Thank you so much, Tammy Jo. I really appreciate you sharing that. Fantastic introduction. So what initially drew you to an MS dynamic? How did you discover that this was the right fit for you?
So when I was a little girl growing up, I processed the world very differently, I learned, than other children. When I saw a TV show where there was any sort of power or authority between romantic couples or potentially romantic couples, I would remember it if it was the woman in charge. If it was the man in charge, which was the most common model, I just often forgot it. It just didn't appeal to me. So there's something at my very core identity level that feels very strongly about how I should be in a female-led relationship and that I'm very capable of being the person who makes the decision and has the authority in a relationship. I didn't actually know what kink was or BDSM was until I got into college. When I got into college, I started taking some women's studies courses, which might sound funny, but in the 1980s, they were looking at issues of power and authority. They were looking at pornography, and this exposed me to what was mostly a for-profit kink world. But through it and through the new internet, I discovered there were people who did this stuff in real life. They weren't just making movies and videos and selling products. They actually lived this way. And so I learned about it. I learned how to do it safely and consensually. I've been doing it since I was, since 1990. So for a long time, my current MS relationship is 25 years old. I had about a dozen DS or MS relationships before that. I've also helped people explore kink in a structured way for many decades before that.
Wow, that's super interesting. I love this idea of this is how you process the world as a young person and really noticed like who was in charge and specifically how that felt for you when the woman was in charge, translating to women's study courses and to you having these relationships in your everyday life. I'm curious, what does a typical day look like in your MS relationship? Do you have any rituals or protocols that kind of help define your roles?
So a typical day has changed over time. When I first got into a relationship with my current consensual slave, he lived in the dorms at college. He lived with us in the summers, and then he would go back to college. This was for the first couple years. So obviously, when you're not living together, your daily routine changes. Once we started living together, changes happened as the relationship grew and we grew as people, and what we did with our lives changed. So when we were both still in college and at university, earning our degrees, doing research, I was also teaching. We had a lot more structure. We had to set up specific times to do things simply because our schedules were so complex. As I transitioned away from academia into being a full-time author and a part-time educator, I had more free time. And as the pandemic happened in 2020, for those of you who still remember it, my slave started working from home full-time. So we had to adjust what we did. We have specific rituals that we use at specific times. We have a nightly ritual where he'll help put me to bed. He kisses my feet. We have a ritual where we greet each other in the morning. We have set protocols, which are structures that you set up to help you function day in and day out. We're a very low protocol household because I prefer to function on the level that this is natural and normal. Our relationship is healthy and it helps both of us, and therefore we don't need all these rigid structures in place. But we have a certain set of rules that we use and that we follow.
That actually leads me right to my next question. How do you navigate consent and rules and boundaries within a 24/7 power exchange? Talk to me about that.
So when I lived in New York City for 5 years and I got into the kink community there, so I finally meeting people face to face. One of the things I developed was a formal procedure to meet partners. So if you are female, especially when you're younger, and you're in a city with an active kink community, you will get a lot of people who come up to you and who claim they want to be with you, they want to see you. And I developed procedures that help me kind of sort through all of that. It saved me time. I was in graduate school at Columbia University at the time. I was a research assistant and then I was a teaching assistant. My time was limited. My writing career was just starting to take off. And I used that intense structure to help figure out if a person was right for me. It is during that process that we would go through exercises, some of them from books about kink that we would learn, some of which were literally testing out scenarios, testing out equipment, testing out play, how well did we relate to each other in different types of play. And we would each take notes, we would talk about things, and then after a certain period of time, we would revisit everything and talk about, do we think we are a match? Do we think this should go forward? It sounds very structured, I know, after I've told you that I'm already a low protocol person. I'm a low protocol person within an existing dynamic. I use the structure to help me decide whether or not it's worth getting into a dynamic with someone. You negotiate all the stuff that you're going to need during that period, during the testing period. Some people call it training. Some people simply call it, the early stages of your relationship. I think a lot of people jump into relationships when they really need to be testing and kind of the waters in each other first. Just jumping headlong into a DS or MS relationship is usually not a very good way to establish your rules, your boundaries, or your consent. It's only through trial and error that you can figure that out.
We're going to start with the quick and dirty subbing edition. This is our rapid fire segment where we get to know our expert with bold questions and honest answers and just enough spice to get us started. So I want to know, in a sentence or two, what is the best BDSM advice that you've ever gotten?
I think just the best BDSM advice, period, is to always consider yourself an expert on yourself, because coming into a community that's so established and has so many social mores to it, people can get lost in the sauce of like, am I conforming to this community correctly? And then that is what leads to consent issues and lack of security. And I think the number one thing is you already know yourself, when you feel comfortable, and it's really important to remain an expert on your own comfort.
Yes, this is kind of a sex educator banner item. I feel like we always say like you are the expert in your own experience. And it's great to hear that it applies to BDSM, especially BDSM dynamics as well. What's the worst advice that you haven't gotten it, but that you've heard around as kind of very common, or things that people think that you completely disagree with?
Yeah, I completely disagree with the idea that a real sub does X, Y, or Z. There's a lot of toxic content out there that are like, a real sub doesn't have limits. A real sub doesn't use safe words. And this is bullshit that, what we call fake doms are saying on the apps to new submissives. And this is the thing that we're trying to avoid by being experts on ourselves, is knowing that anything that I want within my identity of a submissive is fair and good, and safety practices are number one in enjoying BDSM and having a good time, basically.
Yes. Yeah. So not really adhering to kind of notions of what we should be doing, kind of disregarding the shoulds, and really be listening to ourselves and our comfort.
Not letting someone on a dating app tell you what you want and how to get it. Yeah. Unless they have good ideas.
Unless you're very down for that.
Yeah.
This is a hard one. In one sentence, what is the appeal of subbing?
I would say the appeal of subbing is endless vulnerability.
Oh, my heart just opened. I want you to expand on that in a bit, but I want to ask our final question, because I love that idea. Endless vulnerability. It made me. I'm breaking my own rule. It made me really think of like an like imagery of like of someone physically kind of like opening themselves up, which is really beautiful.
And you think there's a bottom to that well, but there is not. It just keeps going.
Oh, wow. And this is our last quick and dirty question. What does pleasure mean to you right now?
Pleasure to me is extending very much beyond the bedroom into sort of an Audre Lorde understanding of the erotic, that pleasure is in moments of lighting a candle, making a pie, taking a breath, being with my people, and that sexuality is just a continuation of a regulated nervous system for me.
Oh my God, you are an expert. Okay, this is excellent. I love that. Okay, so we're getting into the heart of it now. I would love to, this episode's all about subbing. And for those of us out there, a lot of us maybe have engaged in subbing tendencies or have dabbled. But I think that I want to start from kind of a 101 lens for folks who need the groundwork before they could even know what they are interested in when it comes to subbing, potentially, if they are. And so can you quickly define subbing for us? And then off the back of that, what are kind of the most prominent or most popular subsets of subbing, like bratting, service subs, pets, etc.?
Yes, I would love to break it down. So dominance and submission, or D/S/DS, is a subsection of BDSM practice that involves power exchange. And I think the biggest misconception about DS and submission is that it must involve certain kinks. Like if you are a sub, you must bottom for spanking or bottom for other types of impact play or be a rope bottom. And in reality, it really, really boils down simply to that mental exchange of consensual power. So as a submissive, you are playing the role of someone who is giving power, which is a beautiful gift. And the dominant is in the role of caring for that exchange and for receiving that gift in a consensual, safe container. So then as you explore submission, the way that I educate about this that's a little different is that I like people to think about tone before they think about anything else. So, when you picture being a sub, you may have an image in your mind, like some people who are kind of more that resistance brat type of person might think of like being dragged across the sheets and having a tussle, and maybe there's consensual non-consent involved. There's something kind of push-pull. Other people who are service submissives might imagine sort of this like poised and quiet feeling of kneeling on the floor and being a little goopy mess staring up at your dom. Then, pets access that through taking on the persona of maybe a puppy or a kitten or a horse or a pig, depending on what you align with. And maybe you want to be brushed and stroked and cared for, or maybe you want to be disciplined because you've been a bad doggy. So all of these things emanate from tone. And I think a lot of times people come to kink trying to reverse engineer back into the tone via certain kinks. But when you say like, I want to feel this emotion or this experience or this sensation in my body, then we're able to figure out, okay, how do we perform this power exchange using different kinks as sort of the paints in our palette?
Wow. Tone. This is so fascinating. And I'm sure for certain, I don't want to assume, I guess in your experience, do you hear that people will kind of like change tone and change the way in which that they want to engage in submissiveness? Or is it usually you find that folks, once they find their niche, they kind of stick to that? What's maybe, what do you find in your clients or people who you've chatted with?
Yeah, no, I think that it's very contextual for almost everybody. And, there are people certainly that are like, I am a service sub and that is all that I do. And that's totally valid. But my problematic opinion is that those people have not yet encountered the person who brings out a brat in them because there's something about the energy between two people or three people or more people or an entire sex party where you can be present to that moment and ask yourself what's showing up for you. And when I do one-on-one coaching with people or I talk to my community, all that I see is change. And that is also really confronting to people who have fought really hard to find this label that they may have been really uncomfortable with their whole life, and then say, hey, what's going on? I've spent 50 years wanting to be a sub, and suddenly I'm turning into a dom, or I'm wanting something different. And that's sort of like the beautiful thing about BDSM is the safety structures meet you with that constant of change. You don't have to be the same all the time.
Yeah, that must be pretty comforting to allow people to engage in that kind of play and in that kind of shift. I imagine that must feel very cup filling for you.
Yeah, no, it really does. And just to see so consistently that my experience of kink has been an emotional one. And I've seen it as this very wholesome way that people connect. Like you come into it thinking, ooh, leather, scary, discipline. It's going to be like this hardcore, it's going to be Hellraiser in a dungeon. But consistently, even in those dungeon spaces, there's such care and wholesomeness with the way that kinksters relate to each other. And I went out to educate about my personal experience of that. And it has since been reflected to me from people all over the world practicing kink in all kinds of different scenarios that they also find that emotional core and wholesomeness, because it's sort of a place that people can come home unexpectedly.
Completely. And I'm sure that community makes such a big difference. And having someone who is trusted like you to coach, to educate, to chat with these folks, to make them feel not only like normal, but like you said, at home and held. And there's so many complex emotions that can come up with engaging in this kind of lifestyle and or behavior.
And I'm so deep in it at this point that I forget how transformative it can be for someone to simply talk about their sex life out loud and to say, like, I want these things, and then experience me not reacting, just like, yeah, that sounds good.
Neutral.
Like, which, most of society would be like, oh my God, you want what? And I'm like, no, that's pretty much the most normal thing I've heard all week. Thank you for sharing,
That's so good. It makes me think of a book that I read for the podcast called Arousing History of Sex. It's called Been There, Done That, Arousing History of Sex by Rachel Feltman. And we had her on to talk about this amazing book that she had written. And one thing out of many that I took from the book is that whatever you think is the weirdest thing that you want or like sexually, there are a bunch of other people who have already thought about that thing in reverse. Like, we're not that unique, but we just are brought up because of our society and because of our culture and our religious shame and X, Y, and Z to made it seem like we are strange, although we are not.
And that heteronormative sort of societal expectation of sex looking one way is what leads to consent violations. Like I am a really big advocate for awareness around how the sequence, and maybe this is a spicy take, but the agreed upon sequence of heteronormative sex, which comes for queer people as well. But it's like sex happens by rounding the bases to do this. And you should like oral, and you should like fingering, or you should like this, that, and the other thing. That's where consent violations come in. And I would argue that like you have to play on this baseball diamond is rape culture, because people are conditioned into not being able to claim wanting something different than that. So when we, in the BDSM community, we kind of disassemble sex into sort of component parts and say which ones of these are included in what we're doing. And that, people experience sex in so many expansive ways in our community. Like we talk about leather sex as being maybe you're just getting flogged and that feels like a sexual exchange to you. And you don't have to do all these other things that may or may not be appealing, or you've never even interrogated whether they feel okay for you. And just having that space for people to say, no, this is what I actually want, and I'm worthy of receiving what I actually want, is troubling, because then you see in the rest of your life the ripple effect of, oh, I'm worthy of saying what I really want. My no should be respected. And then that's when BDSM starts to cause really good problems, I think, for people to set boundaries.
And welcome to the Afterglow, where we wind things down, reflect on big takeaways, and leave you with one juicy thing to try, think about, or explore before next week. BDSM can be such a fun way to tap into a new kind of sexual energy and pleasure, as long as it's done safely, respectfully, and of course with informed consent of everyone involved. BDSM does take an even deeper level of prep and conversation than other types of sexual activity, especially as you're just getting started with a play partner, or even just getting to know yourself a little bit more in this realm. Remember to take it slow and be so honest about what you like and what you don't like. There should never be any pressure for you to enjoy something that you're not enjoying or to try something you don't want to try. And of course, the same goes for your partners. There is nothing wrong with being vanilla, and there's nothing wrong with being a little kinky either, of course. That's what this is all about, learning your kinks and feeling good about them and confident. If anything from this episode sparked something within you, maybe try tapping into that side of yourself a little bit more. So here's your pleasure practice of the week. It's to really hone in on a fantasy of yours and see what makes it so exciting. Investigate that. Does the feeling of being helpless turn you on, or maybe the feeling of being in complete control? Maybe you like giving or receiving some pain. Maybe it's the thrill of knowing you could just get caught, if you like being secretive. Pinning down what makes that fantasy so exciting for you might just open up a new world of fantasy possibilities that you haven't even gotten to explore yet. Thank you so much for listening. As always, talk to you next week. Love y'all.